Order, order. This is a meeting of the Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee, and I'm delighted that today we're embarking upon our first oral hearing into our inquiry on defence spending in Northern Ireland. It's one of 3 sessions, and today I'm delighted the committee is joined by 2 witnesses in person. Professor Trevor Taylor, who's Director of the Defence Industries and Society Programme at RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, and Leslie Orr, the Director of ADS in Northern Ireland. We're very grateful to you both, gentlemen. And I really want to set the scene with you to ask you for your overview as to the defence industry in Northern Ireland. We have some hard facts about the importance of certain companies that provide much-needed employment in Northern Ireland. But I think it would be good to hear from your perspective what you think the current position is, what the strengths are, and also what the weaknesses are as well. Perhaps if I start with Professor Taylor.
And thank you very much. Good morning. Nice to be here. I think that obviously the defence industry in Northern Ireland is quite small, but it also has a significant history. I think one of the things that people today have to think about is how much notice they're going to take of the history and how much they should be, if you like, thinking of a new start or certainly a development. Now, because the ownership's changed and the major businesses have changed and the technology's changed, as my fellow witness will tell you about. So I think we can divide it. I mean, the 3 major companies, since we wrote the report that I think the committee has seen, yes. The major changes are, I think that as far as Spirit is concerned, obviously the trouble with Boeing in the United States and the door plug has had a sort of ripple effect across the Atlantic, and its future ownership, I don't think its future business, but its future ownership has been thrown into some doubt because Boeing are thinking of buying back Spirit. Nearly all Spirit's business in Northern Ireland is with Airbus. Airbus is the big rival of Boeing. And the supposition in the media is that Spirit, perhaps will be taken over by Airbus. But that's all very much uncertain. So that's a disruptive factor for people that are in Spirit and looking to steer its future. So that's their big change, but they're also involved in a way with GCAP, and the GCAP program is going well. There's an ambitious target of getting some kind of demonstrator aircraft. Quite what it's going to demonstrate, I'm not too sure, but it will certainly demonstrate that it can fly. Yeah, that's a good start, and land as well.
Even better.
But that program's going well organisationally. It's going well politically in terms of and technologically, as far as we can see, it's making good progress. So to be in that will be, and their expertise in materials will be very valuable. So that Spirit is sort of in a period of disruption, but looking back quite positive, I think. Thales has. The more that Ukraine goes on and the more that type of sustained conventional conflict looks possible, the more valuable a company like Thales looks, because its capacity to produce things that are munitions that are these days regarded as consumables because they get used in such large numbers, and their order books improved. I think you've got witnesses from Thales coming. They can give you details, but Thales looks, I think, a much greater asset. And generally, I think that although Thales is a foreign business, it's French-owned, but Thales Northern Ireland has been well looked after by Thales in France. They've seen it as a real asset that they want to promote. Holland & Wolff is a different case it obviously, the name now extend. They bought Appledore.
Yeah.
The big project is obviously the fleet solid support ships, and their big challenge is to recruit the skills and labour and develop the planning and managerial capability to be able to deliver significant parts of that. In the contract, they're supposed to be responsible for the final assembly of the ship, which I would just say that's a big challenge for Harland and Wolff, and it would be really pleasing to see them succeed, because it's an enormous infrastructure sitting in the middle of the city. It will be a really big challenge, and I think I noted that their written evidence to you emphasised their past, and I think it might be quite good if they were to think of themselves as a start-up, because when the new ownership took over, I think the employment at the yard was 40 people. Yeah. Now, so it's one to be watched. Obviously, their partner Navantia has got faith. They've been very innovative. I mean, the new ownership, you have to admire the entrepreneurial spirit that's been shown. But I think that's a big question. Smaller businesses and supply chains, I think, Leslie, I'd much rather hand over to Leslie.
Very good. Mr. All.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate being here. This is a very worthy inquiry. I'm delighted to be here to present, because this is very vital to Northern Ireland, but it's also vital for the all of the UK. The aerospace, defence, security and space industries really do contribute to our security, but also they contribute to our prosperity. And it's very important that all parts of the UK benefit from this. So this is a very worthy inquiry. I'm delighted to be here. As you know, ADS is the national trade body for aerospace, defence, security and space. We have 1,300 member companies across the UK. 95% of all of those are SMEs. And that's also reflected in Northern Ireland. We set up ADS Northern Ireland in 2010. And since then, it's rapidly grown to 130 companies, employing 9,000 people, and contribute nearly £2 billion to the economy. Now, that's the four sectors: aerospace, defence, security and space. We have a very rampant and strong civil aerospace industry. So this defence inquiry really came to life 3 years ago, whenever COVID hit the civil aerospace industry. All the companies came to ADS and said, guys, the aerospace industry is grounded. We need more business. And we tried to help the companies. Yeah. Now, what happened was we looked at the defence numbers, and 3 years ago, the MOD spend in Northern Ireland was £30 per capita. The same number in Scotland was 360. In Wales, it was 280. Yeah. And here in the south of England, it was 1,080.
No, and the job equivalent is only 80 direct jobs supported by the MOD in Northern Ireland, compared to, say, 410 in Wales, for example. That's dramatic.
So this figure of £30 in Northern Ireland and 1,080 in the south here, it needs a radical change. What really needs to come out of this meeting today is, something radical needs to change. It's not a small tweak, something radical. Now, we have been working very hard in the last 3 years to try and grow the industry. And we have seen the numbers have grown from £30 per capita to £100 per capita, which is fantastic, but we're still a long way short from those numbers. We've been working very hard with, particularly the RAF. The services have been very helpful. Air Marshal Sean Reynolds, the Air Officer for Northern Ireland, we've been doing a lot of business engagement. We have seen a number of opportunities come through. I think in terms of the overall industry in Northern Ireland, Trevor's highlighted the main primes. But really what I want to highlight is Northern Ireland is a region of SMEs. Mm-hmm. It is 95% SMEs. The province is driven by family-owned businesses, and that's really the heart of the. Will contribute, say, £2 billion. there's a very, very strong civil aerospace industry with great capabilities that can be transferred to defence, and they are really looking for that. I'm actually going to tell you that the companies are very hungry for that. Just last week I was in a company in Ballynahinch, a Nitronic electronics company, just said, look, help us get into the defence sector. Similar to that, up in Kilray, Hutchinson Engineering site, help us get into the defence sector. Other companies in Portadown, visited with Carla, Boyce Precision Engineering, help us. So the hunger is there, and we really need to help these companies. It is amazing that, I think the key factor is we're 95% SMEs, and traditionally the MOD struggles to do business directly with SMEs. That's well known. Yes. And SMEs struggle to do businesses directly. It tends to flow through the primes. One of the challenges has been for Northern Ireland, I think one of the key factors in all of this is, historically we only had one prime in Talis, was the main defence prime. So the flow to the local SMEs was really through just one prime. Now the opportunity is we've got Spirit Aerosystems coming into defence. We have got Harold and Wolff. It's absolutely fantastic that we're going to get shipbuilding back to Belfast again. And that will help the local SMEs. So it really is, there's a number of factors that really point, Northern Ireland really should be very big in defence. A number of factors I want to highlight. There's a business excellence programme. It's called SC21, Supply Chain for the 21st Century. It's driven by all the UK primes. There's about 700 UK companies on this. And it measures how good a defence company is. It measures, are you good at delivery? Are you good at quality? Are you good at business excellence? And an outstanding fact, Northern Ireland has 70% of the gold UK awards. So bear in mind, guys, we're 3% of the UK in scale. We have 70% of the gold awards. I'll mention a few. Denroy Plastics in Bangor, you'll know them very well. Moyola Precision, Castle Dawson are gold awards. IPC Moulding in Carrickfergus. They're right across the province, not going to mention them all. But these companies are really hungry to get into defence. And the challenge is, they've got all the awards, they've got all the accreditations. They have the capabilities that will really help the MOD with their needs. But we need to bridge the gap. So there's something very major. Other factors that I want to bring into the discussion today is Northern Ireland has supported the forces very much in terms of serving personnel. And we have 160,000 veterans in Northern Ireland. We've provided the people for our services. We now also want to provide the equipment. And so really there's some great opportunities ahead. I think the primes, as Trevor's highlighted, is really the door to really make a major dynamic change in Northern Ireland. But the SMEs really need to benefit. That's the sort of landscape we see on the ground. I hope that's sort of helpful to give a picture.
It is. I'll come back perhaps at the end to just ask you to focus on the British government's announced decision to have a review of the defence industry in Northern Ireland and what your recommendations would be for the focus of that review. But perhaps before we get into that, I'm going to bring in colleagues now with specific questions. I'm going to go to Jim Shannon first. Jim.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, Professor Taylor and Leslie, you both, and thank you for your coming along to enlighten us and give us some of the detail. I'm mind of your comment, Leslie, when you mentioned about the number of veterans there are in Northern Ireland. The fact that conscription was never needed in Northern Ireland all the way through First, Second World War, right through to now, because our very nature as an Ulster man and an Ulster woman is to serve. So when you say we're provided the people, it's now time that the opportunity was provided as well. I think it's fair to say that. And as someone who served in the as a part-time soldier in the Ulster Defence Regiment and also in the Royal Artillery for 14 and a half years, I recognise the importance of serving in uniform and what can happen. Two quick questions. One's, I think perhaps you may have outlined it already, about the advantages. The advantages, I would suggest, you can answer the question, are that we have a skilled workforce who are eager and able to provide what is needed. And at the same time, the challenges that are there, perhaps maybe very, very quickly in relation to the advantages and the challenges.
Yeah, in terms of the advantages, I've already highlighted the business excellence in Northern Ireland. There are companies that deliver, and those companies don't want to win business because of this inquiry or because of a levelling up. They want to win because they're good. So I think that's the first factor. They want to win because they're good. The other advantages are, Northern Ireland is a region of great innovators. They actually have some great capabilities that will really help the MOD and the services with new technologies. I'll pick out a few. Artemis Technologies in Belfast are making e-foiling boats that are not only green but stealth. And we really need all our forces to be aware of these great technologies. Companies like Catagen making green hydrogen production systems. It's very innovative stuff, leading edge stuff that we need to make sure the services are aware of. I think those are some of the advantages. Also the skilled personnel. We can come back to this, but really skills. Northern Ireland is top in terms of A-level grades. It's a really highly skilled economy, and we really need to benefit in terms of those skills, innovation, and capability in Northern Ireland. Also, technologies like cybersecurity. We're one of the world leading regions in cybersecurity, and that prevails right across the services. So those are some of the important things. Some of the challenges, I think, some of the factors. Why is defence spending so low? The figure of 0.15% spend. This is a magnitude. So I think if we consider why, so why is it so low? Historically there would have been issues in Northern Ireland with the Troubles, but look, that's gone a long time ago. I think there is also to some SMEs, the distance between London and here is a factor. To come to exhibit at events, to come to meet the MOD. We'd like the MOD to set up a base in Northern Ireland. We'll come to that at the end. Rather than the SME, cost to an SME is prohibitive. I think very much so. There are a number of reasons there why, but the main one I would say was the fact that we only had one defence prime and the SMEs. So we would like other UK primes to be encouraged to come and see Northern Ireland. So if they're awarded a major defence contract, go and see the supply base in Northern Ireland. Those are some of the things that the disadvantage. There is a geographical disadvantage, Jim, and I think those are some of the issues. But and the historical factors that we really need to get past now.
I suppose first of all, I'll make a play, and as it would be remiss of me not to do so, for Nitronic from Ballynahinch, some between 50 and 60 employees. No, as of yet, any contracts at all with the MOD. Quite disappointing that they've been trying hard to break in. So this inquiry, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, will be to try and see what can the MOD do more to make it happen. And I would say that's what you want to do more. I think the figure you mentioned about SMEs was the figure 96% or something. Anyway,
95% in Northern Ireland. That's
okay. Oh, that gives you an idea how important SMEs are. I think, Talis, obviously the Ukrainian war and the shoulder-held weapons to destroy tanks and so on, give a boost to Talis. And just incidentally, in relation to Talis, Talis have more employees from my constituency of Strangford than have in East Belfast, according to my colleague Gavin Robinson. So it's very important for me to, as the MP for Strangford to ensure that those jobs and opportunities are there. So Talis is getting the jobs. The SMEs will get some of the jobs if Talis get it, if Harland and Wolff break through and Spirit continue. So if you want the SMEs to do well, then the three big ones have to do well for then it filters down. So I suppose maybe, and also then the Talis also have the missile section in Crossgar, which is also in my constituency. So the prestige of having those, but also the skills factor of those as well is incredible. So I suppose what I want to really try and get my head around, and you mentioned a figure, by the way, I think you said 0.15% of SMEs in Northern Ireland at the moment.
The MOD expenditure in Northern Ireland in 2013 was only, with SMEs, was only £2 million, which represents 0.15% of the MOD budget. Their target of expenditure with SMEs is 25%. So we're just at a huge disconnect right now.
That's a massive disconnect, and that's a figure that which is quite astounding. I never realised just it was quite as dramatic of a difference as that. And I think if anything out of this committee and the recommendations that will come, it was how that improves. And whether you start feeding it more into Talis, Harlan and Wolff and Spirit, and then it filters down to the SMEs. But the SMEs, which are the key for Northern Ireland, are something that must happen. What would be your suggestion, Leslie and Professor Taylor, to make that happen in a constructive and positive fashion, please?
A couple of suggestions. One, exactly as you say, the business tends to flow from the MOD through the primes and down to the SMEs. That's the major flow. So, and to really shift the dial that we're talking about, some major piece of work has to go into those three primes. You'll get feedback from those companies, but Talis are a fantastic company in Northern Ireland. See, in terms of height of technology, we think Lewis Hamilton is great keeping a car on the track at 200 miles an hour. These guys can guide something at 3.5 times the speed of sound. These are engineers at the peak of their technology, right? So some major, they'll share with you, but really in terms of commitment, long-term commitment to their portfolio is really what they'll be looking for. And they've been asking that for many years, because long-term commitments how you secure long-term jobs and long-term supply chain. For Spirit Aerosystems, my colleague Trevor shared in terms of their plans to grow their great capabilities in civil aerospace and advanced composites into the defence world and unmanned aerial vehicles. So there's great opportunity for them. The shipbuilding now with Harlan Wolff will lead in the future to the supply base. There is opportunity for small companies to get directly in with the MOD. I want to share one great nugget of a Belfast company, because I like to focus on the good news stories. Little company called Kinsetsu, Northern Ireland company, led by two ladies, 30 people in the company. They've developed sensor technologies, and through a DASA contract, that's the Defence Accelerator Program, it's a government-led program, Defence Accelerator Program. They won a small little contract, and now they are on the HMS carriers, really with sensors monitoring every piece of equipment on the carriers, a little SME from Belfast. So there is opportunity, but that is very unique for a small company to get directly in with the MOD. So my recommendations would be, one, yes, let's see what we can get into the Northern Ireland primes. That's the first thing. Secondly, I think we need some sort of more presence of the MOD in Northern Ireland on the ground, with clear targets.
Yeah.
With clear targets to say, look, are we moving the dial here? And so those are some of the recommendations. Yeah.
Don't set targets. Then you just limber along, and you end up with 0.15% when you should be aiming for 25%. Yeah. So you would agree then, Leslie and Professor Taylor, it's really critical and important to set targets for each year, because if you meet the target, then you're addressing the issue.
Well, perhaps I could just say a few words about sort of defence procurement across the piece for a minute, because that's the dial has moved considerably on that in the last 15 years, in the sense that it was formerly about getting the services, that, the services were the customer, they got what they asked for, they got what they wanted, and where it came from didn't matter too much. I take you back to the National Security Through Technology piece, I think that was the one, but it said that that document was 2014, or you're testing me, but about 2014, National Security Through Technology, it said the default position of the UK will be to buy off the shelf from the international market, so not even the UK. Now we have an acquisition system which is trying to pursue multiple benefits, to bring prosperity, to help levelling up, to sustain the union, which obviously this is a significant part of it, but also to help with climate change, to give the UK operational independence and so forth, as well as and reduce through life costs, make exportable systems. The list goes on. So when you try to sort of evaluate, set target for one particular aspect, SMEs in a particular region, it has to fit into that wider challenges of procurement that the MLD is under. I think from an SME point of view, I think it's not enough to think about the technologies and how clever the technologies are. I think if you're a company, and it doesn't matter what size, you have to think about the market, and we've just talked about defence so far. Whereas I think, if I wouldn't pretend to be able to run an SME, but there are certain sort of questions that they might ask themselves. One, what are the problems that are really pressing on defence? If you don't know what the problems are, you're running around with a solution looking for a problem, and that's, in a sector as big as defence, that's quite tricky. So trying to understand the kind of specific problems that are in defence and the needs of potential customers, that's something which if any company in a market has to ask that question. In defence, we're growing more and more to integration of systems, not just integration of platforms, but integration of systems, so that communications systems that talk to other communication systems, that talk to command systems, that release weapons, that process information. So this business of a technology is right at the bottom of a very complicated network of links, and therefore you've got to ask yourself, how will my technology, how will my individual function that I'm offering, how will it fit? Will it be easy to integrate into a bigger system? Yeah. If it's going to go on a soldier's back or on his wrist, it's not too much of a problem. If it's going to sit in the middle of an F-35, it's a completely different deal. In fact, yeah. So you have to understand the sort of way that defence is going technologically. You have to think also about how it fits with the culture of an organisation. Many military cultures are historically rather conservative. They don't like things that disrupt their organisations. The army still has units that were established, 500 years ago. I'm very proud of it, but there's not many companies that say, "Oh, we have the same kind of organisational structure as we did 200 years ago." But there's a conservatism. So sometimes, I think the company that you mentioned with the sensors on the carriers, had to get past. What it enables them to do is track the movement of sailors around the ship. Yeah. Now, in a crisis, that's really useful. If there's a fire on the ship, or if there's a problem, that's really useful. But day to day, how would it fit with the sailors that have to wear these things? Yeah. I'm asking the question. I'm not saying, but it would mean that somebody would know where they were all the time. Yeah, so that's obviously an issue. So understanding how disruptive a system is. And then the last point I would say is that I have to think defence is a business where the enemy has a vote. So you have to think about, okay, I've got this innovation, how easy will it be to counter it? because somebody's going to try and wreck it. Yeah? And if it's going to be easy to wreck, then it's not very appealing to the Ministry of Defence, because it's not, it doesn't have resilience. So those kind of questions, I think, if SMEs and ADS is there to help them with that kind of thing, and there are other, but if they can get to those sorts of questions, then they've got a better chance. But it isn't, generally speaking, it's a tricky area. The MOD doesn't do too badly with SMEs. We don't want to go the American way. I mean, I have some American contacts, and they have targets for giving DoD contracts to SMEs. And what happens in some cases, I hear, so I'm not saying this is just gossip for the record, but I have known that a large company comes along, sees a bid, requirement, and goes to an SME and says, I want you to bid for this requirement. We'll prepare the bid. We'll write it for you. And when you win the contract, you give us 80% of the work. So, and then that goes down as a contract to an SME, but actually the work's not being done there. Yeah. So these things can be quite tricky. So I'm not so enthused of targets, but I think measuring is quite important. There are two sorts of contracts. The MOD work with SME that goes through a prime, and so it's down in the prime supply chain, and there's a direct contract with the MOD and an SME. Yeah? And the MOD is now publishing numbers on those, and I don't think they're too difficult.
Yeah, the last point, just a quick point, Mr. Chairman, is in relation to the SMEs. The shortfall for the SMEs in Northern Ireland is so enormous, ginormous, that it has to be addressed. The one way of addressing that is the skill, the workforce, the capability is all there. What these guys want is the opportunity. So the way of getting that opportunity is to set a target for not for target's sake, but a target that can make the MOD aim towards a figure is really what we're about. And if it means that the people are there with the skills to take on the contracts that are there, then there's nothing wrong with targets for target's sake. If it means that the MOD can reach a better understanding with SMEs, Northern Ireland, they quite clearly aren't, and they need to.
I just would say in passing that I find the picture rather... It's not too easy to understand, because you're absolutely right about the small proportion going to SMEs in Northern Ireland. But the regions with the larger proportions of SMEs are actually the regions where defence industry overall is small compared with the big areas. Yeah? So the northeast, where there isn't a lot of defence industry at all, if you look in the numbers, it's pretty small. Yorkshire and the Humber, they have a lot of MOD work going to SMEs, and I would confess my ignorance. I don't know why, and it's understanding why it's so big is just as difficult as why Northern Ireland is so small.
Thank you, Stephen Farring.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to Trevor and Leslie. Very good to see both of you. Just to pick up from some of the answers, excuse me, there to Jim. First of all, just in terms of the overall context, we are in very uncertain times globally, and there is a debate around levels of defence spending, UK included, uncertainty, what's going to happen in the United States and their commitment to Europe and the world as well. So I assume that's something that's very much in the background here in terms of mapping out the future. Trying to get a sense from both of you as to what needs to be done differently in terms of procurement policy and the approach to give Northern Ireland a better chance in terms of contracts. Is the problem in Northern Ireland in terms of the nature of the companies? Is the policy, is the problem in the nature of the approach and policy on procurement? I take your point, Trevor, that in the past and to a large extent today, procurement is still heavily driven by best value for money and reliability of delivery. But to what extent then are other factors, or should those factors be brought into play around levelling up social value, geographical distribution into the system. So can you talk through basically the issues with procurement policy as they stand today and how you envisage them evolving? So, Trevor.
But I think we don't know the nature of the next government, but let's make a basic assumption that it's not going to be too different from this government in the defence sector. I think particular reference to tallies, I think that that capability needs to be built into recognised as of strategic significance as the production of ammunition and the production of other complex weapons is. And I think that should happen. I'm hopeful that it will happen. It's moved from, it was, as you read in our paper, it was significantly neglected by the army that just sort of ordered things when it needed them and hoped there was some there to provide them. But now we and that means that you have to place orders that sustain an industrial capability. Now, in the case of, historically with Harland and Wolff, it got orders and it didn't deliver well enough, so the business collapsed. Yeah? And that's why I think of it as a start-up rather than a... but I think that the Ukraine war has raised the question of how do we deter our adversaries, and in particular Russia. And I would say that this is a big question, there's no easy answer, but one simple part of the answer is that Russia must be quite clear that it has no hope of a quick win. Yeah? And if for it to have no hope of a quick win, this side has to have a capacity, NATO side, and the UK as part of NATO, has to have a demonstrated capacity to fight a sustained operation. Now, for how long, that's a different question, but a sustained operation. To fight a sustained operation, you either have to have very large stocks, which are expensive, or you have to have quite large stocks and the capacity to continue and even surge production. And a company like Thales in Northern Ireland fits into that equation. That should be recognised. The other parts of your question about how are these other wider objectives to be pursued? The MOD partly this is not just a matter for the MOD because it's a matter of Treasury rules about how you can award competition. But 20%, up to 20% can go into these considerations. And in terms of levelling up and social value and so forth. I think there needs to be some further evolution of thought within D&S and actually within the Defence Digital, because they're the procurement body. And culturally, remember that individual decisions are taken by smaller groups. Their commercial world in particular, I think, needs to be become more familiar and more comfortable making recommendations that are heavily skewed by these considerations. The Fleet Solid Support Ships contract is a very interesting case where you can see that the D&S made a choice that was going to offer great benefit to Northern Ireland if Northern Ireland delivers. But if Harland and Wolff struggle with their part of the contract, Navantia are sitting behind it, and if they can't recruit the labour force, so they can't deliver the ships anything like quickly. So that's to a certain extent, D&S was got some insurance in that contract.
Leslie?
Yeah, Stephen, very much. It's a great question. In terms of the defence and security industrial strategy, or DCIS, it was very much welcomed by industry, and also the Defence Command Paper was very much welcomed by industry. However, there's a few things, and as Trevor said, we need to move from the transactional customer-supplier sort of relationship between the MOD and industry to strategic partnerships. As he highlighted, Thales should be a strategic long-term partnership for the security of our nation. That's really it's what we're looking for with key major primes is strategic partnerships. That's the first thing. So we very much welcome that, but that it is a change in mindset. This is a strategic long-term partnership between government and industry. That's one key requirement. I think in terms of social value, very much that was included in the DCIS report. Industry very much welcomes that, and Northern Ireland is very much in that social value zone. There's a couple of areas there that probably need improvement. ADS has been working with the MOD really in terms of guidance to the SMEs of how that is all implemented. And so we're working on a guide. It's a social value 101 for SMEs, because at a strategy level, this needs explained to the SMEs. And secondly, the SMEs are saying, we actually need some feedback when we don't win an award. What did we get wrong there? I think those are sort of areas on the ground level, but there is a requirement in change requirements, Stephen.
Hopefully we're going to get an MOD minister in front of us over the coming weeks. I mean, what would both of you recommend that the key questions that we should be asking, or points making to said minister?
Yeah, I think, things like the commitment to the overall spend for the growth of the UK. This is not just all about Northern Ireland, this is about the UK prosperity. So the overall commitment to spend on the sector, the investment in keeping the UK at the top front of these technologies worldwide, really the R&D investment in our sectors. In fact, what we'll share with you, we have an ADS manifesto for the sector we'll share with you. But really is a long-term commitment to that. Another key area that we could come on to is, look, this isn't about Northern Ireland. This is huge value to the UK in terms of exports. The UK is a global leader in this area. And really, we would very much value support from government in exporting. Globally, UK is so well renowned in these areas. If the UK Armed Forces buy it, nearly every other country in the world will want to buy it, because there's a kite mark from UK. And probably an area where we have been struggling as well. We've been trying to sell globally, but if our own forces haven't bought it first, it's a negative. So, but I'm going to highlight a couple of companies in Northern Ireland that have done so well. Cuneen and 5 Mile Town have gone globally selling their stuff. Servitech in Dunmurry have also sold stuff globally. So there's a global market share opportunity here as well. Yeah.
Back on the procurement issue, I'll ask both of you as well. Is there a trend, or what's the best practice or the ideal way forward in terms of the size of some of the procurement packages? Should the MOD be bundling them up and then forcing companies into consortia? And I appreciate it, you may not go into the detail of any live procurement issues, but obviously there's competing over the next generation fighter jet. Or should the MOD bring it up into smaller pieces? What's the best way of handling procurement? I'm sure there's no absolute answer right away on that one, but...
Well, I think, that when you break things into smaller pieces, the question is who is going to put them together, and whether the government, or whether government officials, government staff, have got the capacity to integrate. Yeah, or whether they actually then have to go to a wider... it's a good question as to, the right size, because we're thinking about all this domain integration, and that demands an integrator. I think one thing we haven't mentioned so far, which is very much in the SME space, is that this organisation, DASA, which I think you'll hear quite a bit about, DASA, I think, has been successful in giving awards, quite small awards, but helpful awards to companies, and they make decisions quickly. It's not a big deal. You can apply and get it. So, and they've got a track record of making progress. But there's a phenomenon that's been recognised, which is known in the trade, as it were, as the valley of death. That you get these things which are at TRL, technology readiness level 5 or 6, but you need somebody to carry them through, and you need a program to get them through. And I don't think it's a British problem, it's a problem across elsewhere in the US and elsewhere. But people are thinking hard about how the outputs from DASA, which would include, as has been said, some Northern Irish output, how that can be integrated into things that are actually bought and used. At the minute, that is a problem.
I have a final question, I promise. Leslie, as and when consortia are being put together within the sector, is there a level playing field with regard to Northern Ireland companies, or are they at a certain disadvantage in terms of getting full access to those bigger deals that are being put together?
That's probably one of the things we're trying to highlight, visibility of the Northern Ireland capability. That's really what we're looking for, Stephen. And I think even linked to your previous questions, one of the things that may make sense, look, if this package is going to a big prime in the UK, maybe the requirement is, look, go around the UK, go around Scotland, go around Northern Ireland, go around Wales, and find partners that will give you best value for the UK and best quality and best innovation. I think that's really if it has to go to one major prime, go around the nations and find the quality, find the capability. And we as ADS would very much help with those national roadshows of really growing the projects and getting the best capability for the UK.
Sure. Thank you very much. Kelly Tolhurst.
Thank you, and welcome to the committee, and thanks so far for the evidence that you've given. I just want to come back on one thing before I sort of go into my questions, or not just come back, but just ask for some further information. Obviously, you've highlighted the success of Kensetu with the DASA programme. You said it was unique. That they were able to be successful. Can you sort of tell us, if you know, how were they successful? Why were they successful? And how did they navigate that system in a...
I mean, first of all, very innovative company. I think that's a key to their success. But their entry point was a DASA contract, which was a small contract to get them involved. That got them the visibility on the stage. Actually, once they'd won the DASA contract, that wasn't... Then the next stage was, how do we get this commissioned onto the Navy? That was a different stage. Winning the DASA was a demonstrator. Mm-hmm. So I think, first of all, they got the visibility there. Mm-hmm. Actually, then, to actually get the contract, there's a gap between finishing your DASA contract and actually getting an MOD contract. And normally, for SMEs, the length of time, the legalities, the amount of paperwork to do is just too much for an SME. I do believe, to go on to the next stage, they actually partnered with a prime. But originally, it was the visibility, the technology, the speed of implementation. And that's actually, guys, that's really something that SMEs can give the MOD, agility. And it's not just Northern Ireland SMEs will give them that. SMEs across the UK will give them agility, will give them value. So really, the engagement with the SMEs is really what we're trying to get out of this.
So would you, I mean, obviously, fantastic organisation, but would you say it was just a bit of luck, actually, that they've been able to take it to the next stage rather than being able to benefit from systems that are there really to support SMEs? I know it's a silly...
I don't know the answer, but I think we should praise the MOD for setting up DASA as an entity to give visibility to the SMEs. I think, and it is a small contract, give them visibility. I think that's, I mean, let's give them praise for that. I think it's the right approach.
That's great. That's great. Well, so really sort of moving forward, obviously you've mentioned both of our visitors have mentioned how we should be engaging with the MOD and how the MOD, the relationship there. So just sort of a question for both of you. How do you think, what would your views be in regards to how the engagement with MOD can be strengthened?
I mentioned the civil aerospace side. We've engaged directly with the RAF, which has been very helpful in Northern Ireland, really trying to get to what Trevor says, look, what are the requirements, and then matching companies to the requirements. So we're doing a lot of that engagement. So direct engagement, I think, with all the services would be good. I think then, I would say, setting up a hub in Northern Ireland where maybe it's not target driven, but so that they can see the innovation in the region, so that actually you're meeting the companies that we as ADS are meeting, and really getting that engagement going. I think that those are some of the requirements that we would see as moving forward. Yeah.
I think the service links is an important one. If you go back, less than a decade, but the main procurement body in MOD is Defence Equipment and Support, and the kind of model that was set up by Bernard Gray was one where the services articulated their requirement, and their supplier was D&S, and D&S went out and bought something that met the requirement. Yeah, and therefore, and procurement bodies often not very keen on customers talking to services talking to potential suppliers, because it kind of makes they get afraid that the customer is going to favour a particular supplier and write a requirement that it. Now, the emphasis on partnering, which we're seeing not just in DCIS but in lots of government documents, including the latest procurement model that the MOD's released, is making clear that actually it's a good idea for companies to talk with the services and for services to talk to the companies, because basically the services know more about their problems, they know about the threats and the problems that they have, and the companies know more about technology. So if you get them to converse, then you're more likely to get a sensible outcome. So and those service links. Now, obviously, that's not easy to do for every company, but there are industrial bodies that can help with this. That's what ADS is for. There are local links that can be pursued. It does take time. It takes effort to understand your customers, but that's what companies have to do, whichever sector they're in. I think an MOD. I think there isn't that DASA don't maintain a person. Or when we did our study, DASA were not maintaining a person in Northern Ireland. They have a formal Air Force link, as you mentioned. But
yeah, we have a DASA person that covers Northern Ireland and Scotland, which it's working very well. We're very pleased that just recently the RAF have set up an innovation node in Northern Ireland, which actually is a person looking for innovation, and I think that's part of the answer of the way forward. Let's look for innovation. Let's not try to squeeze a contract where it doesn't make sense. But hey, if we see some great innovation in the region that we really will solve our problems, I think that's a great way forward.
Yeah.
I think also that I would just say that a bit of expectation management. We find out that building industrial capability in defence can be very time-consuming and difficult. It's very challenging. I've sort of, as a quick throwaway line, and I suppose it go in the record, but it's easier to build an air force than it is to build an airplane, and we should never forget that. So maintaining that industrial capability that you have is very important, but also recognising that building it up is not a 10-minute job. It's really so we should look for a rate of change that's I very much support. We found there's a lot of talent in Northern Ireland, and there's a lot of very good suppliers, but it won't happen overnight. We should look to have a sense of it taking quite a while to do. And obviously, we have the political situation in Northern Ireland is very important. The way that companies are set up, that they're set up in such a way that do not reflect in any way the wider political context in Northern Ireland is really important.
No, thank you very much. And sort of moving on to, actually, I want to just get your views on social value in MOD contracts. It's actually, when I was in Bays, it was actually one of my particular bugbears for the social value element and the barriers that it represented to some SMEs, I think, around the UK sometimes. But first of all, obviously, you've articulated a little bit about the value that the defence industry can play and might play in the development of the Northern Ireland economy and prosperity. So the question I would ask is, to what extent does the MOD consider that local prosperity and levelling up when making procurement decisions, and how that social value in the MOD procurement criteria is assessed and how it is assessed and assigned, and are you clear about how that is implemented in Northern Ireland?
Well, you know, the DCIS Defence Security Industrial Strategy brought in a minimum of 10% tender value weighting. It would allocate it on specific social value objectives. Now, the understanding to SMEs still needs to be made clear, and ADS wants to help companies. So there's still an implementation issue on the ground. The goal is good, but the implementation still needs to go somewhere. I think in terms of your overall question of, do they understand the overall impact on prosperity and growth in the region of, defence spend? It is massive opportunity. Yeah. Just to share, we've been driving a strategy in Northern Ireland called Northern Ireland Partnering for Growth. It started in 2014. It was a 10-year strategy, and it was to grow these sectors from 1 billion to 2 billion, to double the sectors. We have hit 1.9 billion. By the Farnborough Air Show this year, we are on target to announce that we have doubled the size of the ADS sectors: aerospace, defence, security and space. Defence has been the very small growth factor. The biggest growth factor has been in civil aerospace. And we have seen the prosperity that brings to a region. Just to highlight, civil aerospace industry is vital to Northern Ireland. The area of the Mournes, Kilkeel, a company called Collins Aerospace makes 1/3 of all the aircraft seats in the world. And that whole area, family livelihoods come out of that business. So the opportunity to really impact the economy, but the opportunity to impact our social setting, it is very interesting. If we look back to the dark days in Northern Ireland, the troublesome spots were the areas of low economic depravity. They were mapped exactly. So there's real opportunity to grow Northern Ireland out of this. And that's why we very much welcome this inquiry.
The defence industry is marked by higher pay, higher productivity than average. It's well known. So its contribution to prosperity, because that then gives you people with higher pay can either invest it or they can spend it and easily spend it locally. So then the multiplier effect is much better than and of course they pay more tax to the Treasury. But defence is solid in that. Just one sort of nuance in all this, that if you are running a competition now, if you're the commercial person charged with running a competition, and it may be not a big contract, but the kind of questions that the SME has to answer in making a bid in the competition are now more complicated because they have to ask you what you're going to do for social value, what you're going to do for climate change, and all this kind of thing. So it's beneficial, but it also, it has other consequences as well, more difficult consequences. But again, that's where I think the industrial bodies can really help.
Just one final, sorry, Chair. So on that point about making it clear, is there something that the MOD could do or another government department to enable our SMEs within the defence sector easier be able to deal with some of those elements? I know supported by great trade bodies, etc., can give that hand. But what I'm trying to get to the point is that actually, is this a key area where some of those SMEs will fall down at the sort of first hurdle, or actually just walk away because this is too much of a challenge? So, have we got the time and inclination to try and answer those questions and deal with it?
And nationally, the DNS have a group inside that are supposed to help with these things. How well it works, I don't have visibility, but the DNS certainly, if you go to their website, their material, they offer advisory services. There's a whole world of dealing with defence, and especially sensitive defence, which can be an obstacle and cause sometimes companies to walk away. I mean, you have to go into the world of security clearances, you have to go into the world of protection of information and the kind of the facilities that you have to, if you're in receipt of classified information. You go into the world, to a certain extent, can also go into the world of export controls, because if what you've got is of demonstrable defence relevance, then it's probably going to need export licenses to sell it over, and sometimes that puts out all those things. But that's just the world of defence. The other part, which just got a passing mention, but is safety, that especially things that go in the air, the safety regime so when you put something in, demonstrating that it's safe is an expense and a problem. Those kind of considerations can put off smaller companies that might look for easier markets.
The point that you raise is actually a priority within the MOD, and they have very much focused on this for quite a while. They've set up an SME action plan, ADS working very closely with the SME. I would say there's still a fair way to go, but it actually is a priority of theirs to be able to engage better. And as I said, ADS is working on together with the MOD on a social value guide to try to really simplify this. The difference is large primes can have lawyers and people to look at contracts. Small companies don't have that. And look, it is a priority. That's the issue. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Goodwill.
Thank you very much indeed. We've heard a lot of evidence today about the importance of SMEs and some of the challenges they face. Mr. Orr, you said you have 130 companies based in Northern Ireland. To what extent are those SMEs that are reliant on subcontract for some, the Thales and the Spirit of this world, and to what extent have we got small independent companies innovating and doing their own thing? Just to give us a sort of a picture of how interdependent some of these companies are on what's going on at Thales or what's going on at Harland and Wolff.
Yeah, it's a company of region of great capability that probably has developed, Short Spirit have been there for over 100 years. So it's a supply chain that's developed around them.
Did you say actually Short started in Kelly's consistency?
Yeah, they came from Rochester, didn't
they? And in fact, the first ever contract to manufacture aircraft in the world between Wright Brothers and Shorts Brothers was in Rochester.
I'm very proud of Shorts. I look at their old slipway every day, sorry.
So this industry that's worth globally, billions of pounds globally, started here. Yeah. And so really the supply base has grown around them. So really to your question, many of them have developed as subcontractors to the primes. And direct access to the MOD has been very difficult. I've only got one or two examples of companies doing direct business. So coming back to the big question, like how do we really shift the needle to correct the imbalance? I think it is really looking at what can the primes in Northern Ireland provide the MOD so that flows down the supply base. I think that's the majority. But now these are tended to be the hardware guys that produced subcomponents. There is a massive industry now in cybersecurity and software services that really can do business directly with the primes and directly with the MOD. So there's a new wave of cyber that can do business directly. But I think to your question, they've developed as subcontractors, the vast majority of the 130.
And before Professor Taylor comes in, and is that sort of predicated upon expansion of the big companies so that they're farming out work they can't do? And if there was a contraction, would that mean they'd take more in-house to keep their own guys busy? I mean, if we can see big expansion, is that going to help SMEs even more?
Yeah, I think it tends to be that many of the smaller sort of machining services and different things have been outsourced to the local supply base, and we really very much see if the topper's filled in at the top, that will spread out along the regions.
Yeah, thank you.
It's not in these MOD figures, but it is some other figures that I've got access to that will be published, but not yet published. So I can't quote them directly. But roughly speaking, it seems to be that about twice as much of MOD spending on SMEs goes in through the primes or the bigger companies, and about a third, I'm speaking roughly, goes in directly with SMEs. You would expect, I think, also SMEs are not all high technology companies, and as Leslie says, the main suppliers already use massive numbers of companies. Yeah, when you look at the numbers of suppliers that BAE Systems have, it's in even in the UK, I think it's in 4 figures. Yeah.
Understood. But I want to ask a little bit about something. I think, Mr. Roy, you talked about bridging the gap between SMEs and companies in your earlier evidence. Is one of the barriers to that bridge being built sort of the whole issue of sort of data, confidentiality, secrecy, and that, often, particularly if you're looking at US technology and ITAR considerations as well, if that's something that people are very nervous about sharing and it can actually slow down the whole situation?
Yeah, there are special requirements in terms of doing business with defence. So, one, for instance, is cyber essentials. So a small business, is your data secure and cyber essential? And I'm actually very pleased to announce that today in Northern Ireland, small companies under 50 employees are being given help with attaining cyber essentials. So to get that accreditation for your cybersecurity is one. The other area is to get security clearances, and ADS very much helps our members to get the security clearances. There's a little bit of a chicken and egg there where you have to have an MOD contract to get security clearance, and you can't get security clearance until you've got an MOD contract. So we have to navigate that a little bit, but security clearance is a bit of an issue there. But look, all the companies, if they see an opportunity, are up to jumping all the hurdles. I think that's the way I see. There's such a desire. I'll go back to the very strong aerospace industry. I'll go back to the fact that they struggled during COVID and they want their eggs in more than one basket. Yeah. And that's really, they're smart businessmen and they very much want to contribute to other sectors.
Thank you. When we were on an earlier visit to Belfast at Queen's University, we were very impressed by some of the cyber security work going on and some of the sort of spin-off companies that were being generated through that situation. One thing that wasn't mentioned was cyber offensive. It was all about protecting your software, protecting everything, how preventing the enemy, your adversaries turning off your power station. But actually, work is going on at turning off their power stations and turning off their air defence systems. Is that something that has to sort of happen within GCHQ or within sort of the absolute security barriers that we have, or is that something that innovation could come forward and is that an opportunity for companies in Northern Ireland?
Black hats.
Pardon?
Black hats.
Yes.
White hats. Good guys and black hats. But I mean, cyber is a contest, as we all know. Yeah, and you rightly pointed it out, and it's very much like the offensive bit is little spoken of, but actually, in order to know you've got an effective defensive system, you have to have a good understanding of what good offensive looks like. It's just so it's a kind of it's an absolute part of the industry, and I think, in my remarks, it was part of, if you've got a product, how easy is it to counter? Well, if you have to have that. It's not just GCHQ, that it's pretty pervasive, that all companies have to figure out some way of defending. I compare it with Fort Halstead and Chertsey, which the Army used to maintain as two research establishments. And Fort Halstead was about how they worked on ways of knocking out holes in armour. And Chertsey, also funded by the Army, worked on ways of making armour that you couldn't knock holes in, because you've got to do both. And cyber is exactly the same, as you point out.
Yes, all in the same vehicle. If you're building a tank, actually, you've got both.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Carla Lockhart.
Thank you, and thank you to the two witnesses today, and thank you for your efforts in Northern Ireland, particularly amongst the industry. I know, Leslie, I've had personal experience, and you go over and above with regards to promoting the industry and trying to assist that cooperation across the water here. Just a few things, I suppose, that I would like to touch on before I get to the skills set would be, obviously you'll know in my constituency I have a strong aerospace and they've kind of pivoted to defence in recent years because of, I suppose, maybe the downturn in aerospace. So always keen to try and support those businesses. So I'm keen to understand, you talked about you really feel there should be an MOD presence in Northern Ireland. So has that been floated? Has there been conversations about that? Is the executive on that page? Have we had conversations here in Westminster about the potential for that? Because I think that would be a game changer in terms of that sort of more strategic look at it, rather than what feels at the minute is a little bit more scattergun, where people have nearly fallen into it as opposed to actually strategically being identified as being exceptional in their field and being part of the overall defence solution. So keen to understand what discussions have been had around that and what more we can do to potentially push that side of things. So if you maybe come back to me on that, and then I'll touch on the next couple of things.
Yeah, Carla, I really appreciate that, because this is probably the first time we're really proposing that here today, that we see some good engagement led by the services, primarily the RAF setting up an innovation node. That's just happened recently, looking for opportunities. And we're aware, for instance, that the MOD has a person in Talis, but I think somebody to look after all of Northern Ireland and to look is something we're proposing today. And if you could help push that forward, if the committee feels that's a good suggestion, that the committee would push that forward. So we're really proposing that here today, because we see the gap is so huge that we need to have a strategic plan to move that forward, and I think that's what we're recommending today.
And I think that's maybe something as a committee we can certainly poke at and see what where it lands, and certainly I'll do everything I can to promote that going forward. And I also think then it's important that we approach the executive so there is that sort of collective voice saying, look, this would be beneficial to the industry here in Northern Ireland.
And just in terms of the executive, very, very positively, as the executive has been formed again in Northern Ireland, ADS have been asked by Stormont to host the all-party group on aerospace and defence. That's just in early forming stage. We actually haven't had our first meeting yet, but there is an all-party group being formed on aerospace and defence in Northern Ireland. So that will join us up in Westminster and here as well. So we're very pleased, Carla, to have been asked to host that.
Well, you will know that our party certainly hasn't been found wanting with regards to this issue and trying to push this issue. And this inquiry is a result of the member from Belfast East, who has been very vocal, our party leader Gavin, in relation to trying to really focus on this, because we know and we see the opportunities for Northern Ireland in it. So definitely you are here and we'll be pushing it at an executive and Westminster level. Just Professor Taylor.
I just want to it's a slight instance of, or maybe it's a significant instance of the impact of a think tank, because the notion of looking at defence industry in Northern Ireland as a whole was actually an idea that came out of the think tank, and the publication that we made then has had impacts and people have taken it further. And I mean, Leslie was working at it hard before, but this picture, it's interesting to me that the work we did has had these consequences. But I think a centre, yes, but also I think there are two things that are more focused. One is that an encouragement that DNS should be monitoring and supporting the development of capability at Harland and Wolff. This is the biggest, it's the big risk. Yeah, if they can't deliver, and it doesn't come off. And the skills that they need are different skills. They're welders and people that build ships. Now they have disappeared. Yeah, so I would very much. If you took a different program, the Ajax program, which some of you will be familiar with, yes, DNS, as far as I could see in my research into that, DNS kind of signed a contract and said, let us know when it's ready. Yeah, and you've got to pay if it's late. There was not a big DNS presence in the factory. There was not a big DNS presence in the test arrangements that they made and so forth. I would hope that with the Fleet Solid Support Ship, that DNS staff do keep track of the progress that's being made, and when Harland and Wolff have problems, I'm sure they will, that DNS offer as constructive help as they can to make sure those problems are managed. Now that's not the same as that's because this is a big project for it. The potential of it in terms of re-establishing shipbuilding in Northern Ireland rests on this contract. Yeah? If this contract fails, it won't come back again, I don't think. So I hope DNS would be supportive. I think that the building tallies into the weapons, the consumables, let's call it, area that we have with ammunition and so forth. That would be helpful. And I mean, Spirit are excellent at composites and composite structures. The MOD is in a big place about uncrewed air vehicles, because the possibilities are endless, and you can get one for $20 and you can get one for $2 million. Yeah, and this is an area where Spirit are extremely interested. So I hope that they can be fully involved in the discussions that the MOD is trying to work out how we use uncrewed systems. Not necessarily. There's an interest in autonomy, but autonomy is very AI driven. and that's not necessarily that's something which some of the IT work would help with. But it's sort of I suppose what I'm saying is that having a centre is one thing, but actually having the key players in the different sectors fully engaged. The shipbuilding one, I think, will. One of the things that affects SMEs is clustering. In other words, it's geography. Yeah. Now that used to be the case in Northern Ireland with the shipbuilding industry and with Shorts. Now, it's kind of survived that there are SMEs associated with Thales and with Spirit. Not because there was no business. It's not just a matter of building the capability at Harland and Wolff. It's a matter of building the supply chain among local companies at Harland and Wolff. Yeah. So all these avenues need to be pursued, and they're a bit different, if you see what I mean. And so as well as a centre, I'd like to see the individual projects and individual companies being addressed and supported.
Okay, thank you. And then just very quickly, Leslie, you talked about the visibility of Northern Ireland's capability, and I thought that was a great line. I thought, it's not visible how good we are and how much we can contribute to the overall picture. So keen to understand how you feel we could increase that visibility on the ground. And then I think one of the problems that holds us back potentially is the skills shortage, and certainly in discussion, I suppose, in preparation for this, I spoke with some of the companies that you will well know in my own area, and they say that the skills side of things is a problem. So keen to understand what your sort of assessment is of the skills shortage for the industry in Northern Ireland and the UK as a whole, and then sort of what steps could be taken by the government here and the executive with regards to ensuring that people have the right skill set. This workforce planning issue, still think we need to really drill down into ensuring that careers, teachers and schools are in tune with what industry needs are, and many of them are, but because it changes so much, I think we need to keep sort of reaffirming that this is an area where there's potential for young people. And then just around skills required by the defence industry and how they're changing and how we need to adapt to that.
Yeah. Certainly, first of all, on the visibility, we're totally agreed on that. Like, I think we both see it and we're passionate about it. We see the capability in Northern Ireland, but that to see that visibility, to make it shown across the UK and across the globe, should be a priority. So in terms of that, we're looking forward to hosting this committee in Northern Ireland so as you can get in front face to face with those companies. I think that's the first thing. I'm trying to represent them, but I want you to hear from them directly. So I think our team's already working on that meeting later in a couple of months or a month's time.
Yes.
Secondly, I think on the visibility point, I think government can help. Look, there is a challenge I highlighted earlier on for Northern Ireland companies to come and exhibit at Farnborough or exhibit at DSEI, the big defence show. There is a cost. There is a higher cost. We're part of the UK, but there's a higher cost. And I think if there was help for Northern Ireland companies to come and exhibit, I think that would be something we would ask for. Even globally, that the DBT globally would really sell our defence industry. I think that those are visibility points. On the skills front, look, you will know, Northern Ireland MPs will know, we're a very highly skilled workforce. Northern Ireland has the top grades in A-levels, top in A-star and A grades. Northern Ireland every year gets the top marks. So we're a very highly skilled region. We as ADS, we have very good links with Queen's University, University of Ulster. Next week, on Tuesday, we're running the Schools Rocketry Challenge at RLC over at Langford Lodge near Crumlin, where the schools are taking part in the Schools Rocketry Challenge. And that's just to engage the young people for tomorrow. We're also got a Schools Build a Plane project going on quite amazingly at the Maze, where schools are building a real aircraft. So the transformation of what the maze was now to being a hangar for young people for the future, we're excited about. We had a target on our Northern Ireland Partnering for Growth strategy to grow the industry from 8,000 to 12,000. We got to 10 and then COVID hit, and that set us back. We haven't reached the target of 12,000 employees in the sector. Now, the factor there isn't that we haven't got the people, or isn't that, we haven't got the jobs. The issue is right now is we can't get the people. So skills is an issue. Skills is an issue right across the UK. Actually, Northern Ireland is probably in a slightly better position, I would say, than the rest of the UK. We have got great skills, but it's an issue right across the UK. And as part of ADS manifesto, we're really calling for a long-term strategic workforce for the workforce for tomorrow, really looking at a strategic plan. So it's an issue right across. One specific thing that we would ask for help for Northern Ireland and to push it forward, all of us, is the apprenticeship levy. And the specific factor in Northern Ireland that you may be aware of, that it comes back as part of a block grant and then not necessarily used for apprenticeships. Now that is a big issue.
Used for apprenticeships at all?
It's not good for apprenticeships at all. So look, that is a factor. Companies are paying a tax that's going back to Northern Ireland as a block grant that's not being used for apprenticeships. That needs fixed, right? It's
been one of our hobby horses,
yes.
actually. It's
yeah. So thank you. Sorry if I've
No.
All right.
Thank you, Carla. Stephen Farry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just coming back on two questions on skills and our R&D, respectively, but building on your last answer there, Leslie. I absolutely agree with the quality of the skills that are produced by our local colleges and universities, but we are conscious of particularly gaps in the volume of engineering graduates coming through, and that probably references back to a previous inquiry that the committee did in terms of the Northern Ireland economy. So I take it as read that you would encourage the Northern Ireland executive to look seriously at the scale of the people coming through in engineering and other STEM subjects. And then there's probably a second question then, just more broadly, to talk through in a bit more detail what's happening in terms of the wider ecosystem, in terms of interaction between companies and universities at the research level, and also other research that's happening independent of the universities, and how that could be better supported by government. Just by way of context, obviously there is a lot of research spending was generated through Northern Ireland expenditure. There's also patterns in terms of the big research investment that happens UK-wide, which again is overly targeted at what's called the Golden Triangle between Imperial, Oxford and Cambridge. And is this mirroring what's happening in terms of defence spending? And again, is there a parallel there or a synergy with breaking through the R&D knot with breaking in terms of the defence spending knot?
Yeah.
Trevor, you go first.
The defence companies do spend quite a bit with universities, and not particularly Oxford and Cambridge, to a certain extent Imperial, but they are the engineering specialists. Loughborough and Cranfield are prominent. It's an extremely difficult issue, because everybody recognises that we need more people, fewer people like me that sort of technologically literate, but and we need more STEM qualified people. But the range of skills that are required for defence are very wide. Yeah, shipbuilding is still, to a certain extent, quite an old-fashioned business, and that's why perhaps I've come across as the bit that I think the positives in Northern Ireland are quite strong. Leslie, we visited and were persuaded that that Spirit and Tallies and even some of the SMEs had got decent prospects. And okay, there are obstacles, but decent prospects. But the big gamble was in the engineering piece. The one question that I would ask is to everybody is, given the output of Irish universities in STEM subjects, and particularly in IT, does the improving political situation there make it more likely that more of those people will stay in Northern Ireland rather than look for jobs in England? Now, the English equivalent to that problem is that a good STEM graduate can pick up a much higher salary in the City of London than they can do in an engineering factory.
That's the crux of it, yeah.
So, you know, I think, you know, I would hope that improving the political situation will make it easier to keep good people in the province. Yeah.
Stephen, you know, you've absolutely hit on it. As a person who spent 8 years of my life at Queen's University, I first did a BSc in mechanical engineering and a PhD in aerospace manufacturing at Queen's. Really increasing the quota for engineers at Ulster University and Queen's University should be an absolute priority. They are great universities. I have a personal concern that we are attracting so many foreign students to those that the local staff that will stay there and grow our industry for the future, the limited number of places for engineering is actually curtailing our industry. So I absolutely advocate what you're asking for, to increase the number of engineering places at the universities is absolute priority one. I would also, to your question in terms of R&D spend, we're actually working right now on the civil side to grow the ATI engagement in Northern Ireland, the Aerospace Technology Institute. We actually have to do the same in the defence world because we're nowhere near there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Kelly Tolhurst.
Thank you. And just wanted to sort of touch on exports. I know we've touched on it very briefly, but to you, Mr. Orr, what is the value of exports to the defence and security sectors in Northern Ireland? And what else, is there any additional government support, or how do you think that government could support, with additional support, Northern Ireland's defence and cyber industries for that exporting challenge?
Okay, I don't have the precise data on exports of defence from Northern Ireland, but I am aware that, you know, our biggest prime, Thales, a substantial amount of their business is exports. They're winning contracts in Malaysia, they're winning contracts in Southern Asia, they're winning contracts in the Middle East, and actually with some of the newer technology that our own forces don't have. So exports are vital, and really the passion plea for this inquiry is really the opportunities for across the UK to grow our exports. And as I said earlier on, government partnership in this will be key, because as I say, there's a term in the industry that uniform buys from uniform, and very much so if we have partnership with industry, we can sell and help sell globally. I did highlight 2 local smaller companies that are winning in the international space, Cunin and Servitec. But I think we need more help in exports. We do need more help, a joint UK industry and government selling together plan on defence to the countries that we feel should merit that. I'm very conscious that it's a plan of the US. We've currently had so many visits from the US DoD that they are investing in trusted partner countries around the world, and we should be doing the same.
Don't overlook that the wings that are made at Spirit onto the 220, and look at the numbers that are being manufactured, are all exports. Yeah. And Thales operation, you could ask their executives to confirm, but I don't think Thales factory in Belfast would have been there without exports, because the I suppose you have to say the army, but the MOD, the army actually took its eye off the ball, and the scarcity of orders for the products that TALA's made did not show any awareness of the strategic need of the companies for business. But as said, the company managed to find export markets, which kept the capability there.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I want to reiterate the point I made earlier about the government's review. And I think as a way of summating the evidence today, can you just give us very succinctly the points that you think the government needs to focus on? I mean, one of them, I think, might be, and it's come out from very much your evidence today, about the need to help support the role of SMEs in the supply chain, for example, bearing in mind the key role of SMEs in Northern Ireland. But I'd be interested to hear from both of you, just to say 3 or 4 bullet points that you think the MOD should be considering as part of their review, the topics that they should focus on.
Yeah. I certainly think we very much welcome the social value initiative, and I think working on that, clarifying that for SMEs is point one. Really growing the SME action plan to engage with SMEs is point number 2. Point number 3 is really this thing about strategic partnerships, as Trevor been outlining. Look, this is a long-term industry. This is a key prime. We're going to nurture this for the long term. We're not going to place an order and 10 years later go back with another order, hoping they're still there. Yeah. I think that is one of the key things. This shift of strategic partnerships would be sort of 3 of the main asks.
Thank you, Mr. Orr. Professor.
Well, I'm not sure if I've got anything much further to say about the. I mean, I think if I ventured onto sort of more political ground, that they should be thinking about whether the changing political situation in Northern Ireland means that the government and the defence sector in particular should actually be thinking specifically about Northern Ireland and the opportunities that it raises, because we frankly don't know about any prejudice or concerns, risks that might have been associated with previous thinking. But if you are thinking about increasing the prosperity of a region, then defence is quite a good way of doing it. And I think there's increased awareness of that because of the salaries and so on that it involves. So that whether or not they shouldn't be thinking specifically, as this committee is doing, about not just the share, but whether there are opportunities and what the impact would be on the political environment in Northern Ireland to have greater prosperity.
That is a very, very good point to raise, because there is a question, I think, inevitably this committee will look at, which is clearly there has been a reluctance historically for political reasons for perhaps the UK to cite many of its strategic defence interests in the 6 counties. But as the world changes and becomes a more uncertain place, and as we hear more voices in the Republic talking about their defence capability, perhaps now is the time for a revised appraisal of the importance of citing strategic defence businesses and capability in Northern Ireland, and indeed more generally in the island of Ireland.
Very much, support that overall vision. This has a huge opportunity to develop the prosperity of Northern Ireland, and it is something totally within the government remit to make change. So, it's within our control, it's the right thing to do, and the industry is very hungry for it.
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed to both witnesses for comprehensive evidence this morning. We're grateful to you. The committee will consider these matters again on 2 further occasions before providing a report. Thank you for attending. Order.
The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended.